24 hours a day, 365 days a year, cab drivers weave their way through city streets there at the wave of a hand to take you home or out or wherever. And their stories are as different and fascinating as the routes they take. Writer Marcello Di Cintio details some of them in his new book. It's called Driven: The Secret Lives of Taxi Drivers. And Marcello Di Cintio joins us now from Calgary, Alberta on that. Buonasera, come va?
Hello, how are you?
I'm just
It's so
terrific. Thank
nice
you.
to meet you in person that
I have
way.
to confess, I love saying your name. Your name is so poetic. It's just great.
I love hearing you say my name.
Well, thank you. I love this book. This was terrific.
Oh,
And
thank you.
it makes taking a cab, it gives you a whole lot to think about the next time you hop into a taxi. But the first line of your book is so fascinating. Your first line is, I hate taking taxis. So how did you go from hating taking taxis to spending so much time writing a book about them with, frankly, such considerable affection and interest?
Well, yes, I should say, I mean, yeah, I hate taking taxis. You know, all the other books that I've written are travel books. I've traveled, far afield to Africa, the Middle East, and in those kinds of traveling, your taxi drivers almost always a nemesis, right? These are places where the meters don't work or don't exist, and so the end of every trip is a negotiation, often a heated one over the fare. And so, spending so much time in traveling those parts of the world, or having to deal with those arguments all the time, I kind of have this. I call it the post-taxi stress disorder. So every time I get into a cab, I feel this like Pavlovian anxiety. So I don't have a huge affection for driving cab, but I started to wonder what I was missing on my trips to and from the airport in the cab in the taxis to go on these long trips abroad. What were the stories that I wasn't getting that were just in the seat right in front of me, right? Who were behind the eyes I could see in the rearview mirror. So I decided that for I spent a little more than a year, and instead of leaving Canada like I normally do, I spent the time traveling around this country, meeting with drivers and getting their life stories, getting to hear their personal narratives. And I found some amazing stories.
Yes, you did. But what did you think you were missing out on that you hadn't even considered, despite all those taxi rides that you were taking, that prompted you to write the book about them?
I was missing everything. I'm sure, like most people, I get into the back of a cab, I blurt out my destination, and then I stare at my phone for the entire journey. Right? There's the taxi is such a unique and strange place if you think about it. Where else are you in such close proximity with a stranger for so long and engage is so little, right? There's very little engagement that happens between the driver and the passenger. And I mean, it's true that most of the drivers in Canada come from somewhere else. I didn't need to travel outside of my borders to hear amazing stories from faraway places. Those stories exist all around us.
Well, let's go back, because the taxi industry does go a long way back in Canada. Maybe, I don't know, give us a few details here. How far back does it go?
The history that I found was the first taxi company in Upper Canada was founded in 1837 by a couple from Kentucky, Lucy and Thornton Blackburn. Now, I imagine if you're in Upper Canada, if you're in Toronto at the time, you get into this horse-drawn cab, you blurt out your destination just as we do here, and instead of looking at the cell phone, maybe you look at the day's newspaper, and you don't pay much attention to who it is that's driving this cab, whose hands are on the reins. But Lucy and Thornton had an incredible story. They were slaves in Kentucky, escaped slavery, crossed the Ohio River, and made it to Detroit, where they lived for 2 years before being recaptured. Both of them escaped prison and crossed the border into Canada. And their former owners sued Canada for extradition. This was their property they wanted back, and Canada refused. And the Blackburn case was one of the precedents that started the Underground Railroad in motion. And so imagine sitting in this taxi, with Thornton on the roof, with his hands on the reins, and not realizing this incredible life story of the man driving you around. And that's exactly the sort of thing I was looking for too. I wanted to know where these men and some women came from. What were their childhoods like? What did they do before, ending up in the driver's seat? That was my main focus. I was less interested in taxi driving than the taxi drivers.
And at what point did it become a pretty good way to make a living in this country?
It's interesting. I think the taxi industry has always been a place where people who it's work that was relatively easy to find. It allowed you to be independent. It allowed you to work late nights if you wanted to, or during the days if you wanted to. A lot of the cabbies that I met, none of them ever intended to drive cab. In fact, one of them said to me, "No mother ever gave birth to a taxi driver." And so it ended up for a lot of these, again, mostly men, an industry of default, and it's always been that way. It's kind of like lost souls ended up behind the cab. They found these wonderful old, decades old kind of studies of cab drivers, and there was a lot of people who were kind of society's lost folks. In the 80s, it stopped. It became the 70s and 80s. It became a place where new Canadians could find work. A new Canadian who comes and has perhaps his or her credentials are not recognized by Canada. They can find work driving cab. If they know how to drive, they can find work driving cab, and it allows them to maybe be in school on their off driving hours. It allows them to be flexible with their children and other jobs. Often working 2 or 3 different jobs. So it used to be a much more flexible and lucrative job than it is now. I mean, we could talk about that if you like. But back in the day, it was a reliable source of income for new Canadians.
Well, you've partially answered this question, but I don't think entirely, because I know when I was a kid, Marcello, every cab you got into was driven by somebody who was born in Canada. Now, when you get into a cab, I'm not sure there are any taxis that are driven by somebody who's been born in Canada. It sounds like you're saying it was the 1980s where that changed, and why did it change?
Immigration policies changed in Canada. Immigration policies changed in Canada, and also world events led to it. Wars in the Middle East and Africa, coups. These sorts of things that people fled danger in their homelands and ended up in Canada. Sometimes as refugees, sometimes as regular immigrants. But that's when that shift started to happen. But you're right. The majority of cab drivers in Canada are born elsewhere, especially in the major cities. I think it's sometimes 80% of drivers in big cities or somewhere around there are from somewhere else.
And I think, like you, every time I get into a cab, I actually don't stick my nose into my phone. I do like to engage with the driver, because it's true. They've all got amazing backstories. And you have, I mean, you've nailed it in this book. People who come out of war zones, who come out of oppressive regimes. And I just want to talk to you about some of the examples you give. Mohammed,
Sure.
Mo, Abdul, Jalil. What's his story?
As a writer, you're not supposed to have favorites, I think. But Mo Jalil was one of my favorite drivers that I got to meet when writing this book. Mo was a wrestler and a soldier in Iraq. He fought 2 wars for Saddam Hussein and also served time in an Iraqi prison for assaulting a superior officer before he decided he wanted to be an artist of all things. Now you imagine, Mo is this big, bruising Iraqi guy, and he wanted to be an artist. And he eventually ended up in Halifax, where he went to art school. It didn't go well for him. But also, Mo suffers from tremendous PTSD from his time on the battlefields in Iraq, and he brought that with him too. So he's a guy who's big and boastful. He refers to himself as kind of a peacock. At the same time, he's a damaged guy, and I don't think I've met another human being, much less another driver in this book, who's has such self-awareness about his own failings and his own mistakes that he's made in his life. Here's a guy who's been through a lot. Here's a guy who's endured violence, and here's a guy who's propagated violence, and is incredibly open about it. And he's warm at times. He's bristly at other times, and he's lived the kind of incredible multi-layered life that was just a joy to be able to hear about. I loved the time I spent with Mo in Halifax.
One of the other drivers you profiled went on to become a prominent novelist, and I hope I'm saying the name correctly. Rory Hae, is that how you say it?
Rory Hae.
Hodge. Tell us about Rory.
Yeah, Rory grew up in Civil War Beirut. Finally left the violence and war and chaos when he was 19 years old. When that explosion happened in Beirut last year, it wiped out what used to be his neighborhood. He ended up in the States for a little while, and then in Canada. He wanted to be a photographer. He wanted to be a fine arts photographer, and he decided to get his MFA. And he felt that the only way he could afford his MFA was to find a job that allowed him to go to school during the day and work at night. And the taxi industry in Montreal was perfect for him. So he started to drive cab in Montreal, and he admits he was a lousy cab driver. He had poor night vision, and he had a terrible sense of direction. But nonetheless, he drove cab in Montreal. And while he was driving cab, he wrote his first novel. And it won the Impact Dublin Prize, the largest literary prize in the world. And he wrote that book while driving cab. And in fact, when the book first came out, he tried selling copies to his passengers. And he was not a very good, if he wasn't a very good driver, he wasn't a very good salesman either. But it turns out Rory didn't need to be. He's one of Canada's most celebrated authors. And his story is unique in the book because the interesting part of Rory's story is how he stopped driving cab, like what happened afterwards. And for the bulk of the drivers in my book, it's who they were before. What were their lives before they ended up behind the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to circle back to something you said a few moments ago, and that is you described the profession as mostly male, but some female. And the fact of the matter is, it's almost entirely male and I can't remember the last time I got into a cab and I saw that there was a woman behind the wheel. Why is this profession so male?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, it's something that whenever women are in the business, and I found a great story about a group of women in Paris, World War I era Paris, who started driving cab, and they were a sensation. It was a novelty that these women were driving taxis. I think there's obviously taxi driving is a dangerous profession, and especially for women, especially driving at night. And it's always been this kind of male preserve of work. Yeah, exceptionally few women drive. I talked to the manager of Beck Taxi, which is the largest taxi company in Toronto and probably the largest in North America. And the manager said that she can only recall something like 15 women ever working for Beck. And so, yeah, it's always been kind of a male job.
And yet you did profile this ride service that particularly specializes for Indigenous women. I think it's called Equisafe Rides. It's in Winnipeg. What's the background behind that? Why that started up?
Well, in my book, almost all the drivers that I met are kind of the heroes of the stories, all the taxi drivers I met. Not so much in Winnipeg. In Winnipeg, the regular traditional taxi drivers have a terrible reputation for treating women, particularly Indigenous women, poorly in the taxis. So a group of women decided to counter this problem. They started their own ride service called Equisafe Rides. And what it is women who have a vehicle and have some time to volunteer offer to be drivers, and they drive only other women around. And so other women in Winnipeg can sign up to be part of this community, really, of drivers and passengers. And so when they need a ride, they post it on this dedicated Facebook page. And if a volunteer is available, they respond and they drive them around. It's a charity, I suppose. The passengers will give a donation to the driver, but it was able to kind of circumvent what was going on with the regular industry. Now, let me be clear. I reached out to Winnipeg's taxi drivers to ask them about Iqway and about the reputation, and no one would speak to me. So I want to make sure that it's clear that I did do my best to talk to those drivers, but they didn't want to talk to me. But instead, what's happened is this really wonderful community is formed between women in Winnipeg, hundreds of them, who drivers and passengers who've gotten to know each other. Friendships are developed. There's relationships between everybody. It's really quite a beautiful thing.
I have to say, you are nothing if not blunt about some of the stuff that takes place in the back of a taxi cab. And a lot of it is sex, and a lot of it is gross. And you don't spare us a lot of the details. Now, let's talk about there's a story about a woman named Sammy Marie. And, on the one hand, um, it is a sad and tragic tale. On the other hand, her efforts to get her life together are really quite inspiring at a certain point. Tell us her story, if you would.
Sure. If I may just step back a little bit, there is this kind of cliche of what I call a taxi noir about the kind of sex, drugs, and misbehavior in the backseat of a cab, right? And when I was talking to the drivers, a lot of them thought those are the stories I wanted to hear. And for the most part, I didn't. I really feel that those are the kinds of stories that are pervasive in our pop culture already. And I was really looking at more of the backgrounds and the life stories of these drivers more than that. However, Tammy Marie. Tammy Marie was a sex worker in Calgary, and she was a street level worker, and she was a drug addict. And if she talked to me about how for her whole life, her whole career as a sex worker, taxi drivers were her guardian angels. They were the ones that kind of occupied the same nocturnal environment that she did. They were the ones that she could trust to take her away from terrible situations. And so she had this remarkable relationship with drivers. One in particular, this gentleman named Sam, who she never got to know his last name. And she was kind of he was her reliable driver for several years. And, when she started to switch from, softer to harder drugs and then even harder drugs, it was Sam who convinced her that she needed help. And it was Sam who picked her up from her recovery center when she on her weekends, between recovery. And he may have saved her life.
Well, it was also Sam, though, if I remember this correctly, upon whom she was performing sexual services, even though she was a minor at the time. So how do we square that
Yes.
circle?
I don't. And I asked Tammy about that. Yes, here's a man who's a grown man, an adult. You were a teenager. He was your guardian angel, as you say. At the same time, he was paying for sex with a minor, and she said to me, she does not see that as exploitation. And I guess we have to see Tammy's world from her own eyes, where in the environment where she operated, or the environment where she worked, there was so many other dangers of exploitation and abuse from police officers, often from her clients, that this consensual relationship between her and their driver, to her, did not seem like exploitation. Now, of course, the law disagrees, but from her point of view, Sam was a hero for her.
Okay. I do want you to tell us about how dangerous a profession this can be. And you do have one story in the book about a cab driver who really, oh my goodness. I mean, okay, you tell the story. I won't spoil it, but he's been through the ringer, this poor guy.
Alex in Edmonton. Yes, Alex, again, another great story. Alex and his family escaped from Czechoslovakia in a battered Skoda, ended up in a refugee camp before getting to Edmonton. And Alex's get rich slow scheme was to train his daughter Eva to become a championship tennis player. That's where we thought he was going to make his fortune. That didn't work out quite well. But in fact, he was estranged from Eva for many years, until a few years back, Alex was driving someone in his cab. The gentleman, Alex describes it as he saw a flash of metal and quickly dodged it. And it was the gentleman in the back seat had pulled a hunting knife out of his bag and was trying to stab Alex in the neck. And what ended up happening was this fight inside of the cab between this man with a knife and Alex, who took wounds to his ribs and to right underneath his chin. He came close to slashing his throat. But what the assailant didn't realize before he attacked Alex is that Alex has a black belt in this obscure karate style, and was actually trained in how to disarm an assailant. And so while this guy's trying to stab Alex is headbutting him and kicking him, and ends up kind of subduing this guy who jumped into the front seat. And eventually, the kind of this crowd of people gathered around, and they separated them out. And Alex was brought to the hospital and sewed up the wounds on his hands and his neck and his ribs. The assailant actually almost bit, like it had teeth, bite marks all on Alex's arm. But he survived, and that was part of the reason. I'm not going to say it was the whole reason. But part of the reason him and his long estranged daughter kind of reconciled. It was like when I talked to her, she said, "Yeah, I almost lost my dad," and she didn't want to be away from him anymore. And this very close to death experience that Alex suffered kind of brought his family together again.
Do you know if he's still driving?
Oh, good question. I don't know if he's still driving. Last time I checked, he was still driving. He doesn't play tennis much anymore. There was he got a knife wound in the hand that made his racket grip weaker. So he's a guy who used to win medals internationally in kind of senior or like masters tennis tournaments. And I'm not sure how much tennis he plays now, but he's in spite of everything this guy's gone through, you will not meet a more charming, happy, vivacious human being on the planet. It was funny that when the Edmonton Journal reported on his assault, they called him an elderly cab driver. You would never, if you ever met Alex, you would not consider him an elderly anything, even though he's nearly 70. That guy's a gazelle.
Let me ask you about danger of another kind, and that is, as the pandemic was taking hold, there no doubt were people who were COVID-19 hopping into taxis and infecting drivers who were not wearing, at the time we weren't wearing masks. We didn't know to wear masks. What can you tell us about the impact COVID-19 has had on this profession?
Yeah, it was interesting. This book was finished before the pandemic started. And so I actually went back and added I called it my pandemic postscript, where I went back and talked to the drivers who I previously interviewed and find out kind of how things were going for them during COVID, and not well. Yes, absolutely. You think about the close proximity of strangers, in a taxi cab that exaggerates the danger of what can happen. I don't think they know the numbers for sure, but at least a dozen Canadian taxi drivers have died from COVID, and who knows how many have been infected. Some of the companies have done their best to put screens, between the front and back seats if they didn't exist before. I talked to a driver in Cranbrook, and his taxi manager hung shower curtains that they bought at the local Canadian Tire or Home Depot between the front and back seats as some sort of preventative measure. But these drivers, they're putting themselves at considerable risk, right? Not only are they in this close contact in an enclosed space with strangers, they are also driving people to and from their testing sites. They're driving people to and from their doctor's appointments. And let's face it, the people who are breaking the rules and are doing these indoor gatherings and having house parties, when they're done, when they're done their parties, then they're done maybe passing COVID all around that group, they call a cab to take them home. So the drivers are at the front line of the worst kinds of behavior during the past year. And I think we need to realize in this country that we really need to realize that from the very beginning, the drivers have been there for us. We didn't bang our pots for the drivers last spring, right? And maybe we should have. And maybe we should realize the risks that they've taken to continue doing their jobs.
Marcello, in our last minute here, I just wonder whether or not you've heard back from any of the people that you've chronicled, and whether or not they are pleased or concerned or what about the fact that you have told their stories the way you've told them.
I heard from quite a few, and most of them are very pleased. No, I mean, all of them have gotten back to me who are very pleased. And I was most worried. We talked about Mo earlier, so we can end with Mo. I was a little bit worried about Mo because, like I mentioned, Mo is this. Mo contains multitudes. He's this kind and gentle guy, but he's also kind of a beast, and kind of he's got this arrogance. And I really wanted to paint a picture of Mo that kind of captured all those layers to him. And I was not sure he would like it or not. But oh my goodness, Mo was thrilled, and it seemed like he quite enjoyed kind of the warts and all portrayal that I had with him in the book. I don't write books to make friends with my sources. At the same time, I would hate if they felt that they're misrepresented. And seems like the drivers that I did write about who have gotten back to me have enjoyed their portrayals.
Well, I sure did. This was a great book to read. Driven: The Secret Lives of Drivers, Taxi Drivers. Marcello Di Cintio. Well done, and we're so grateful you spared some time for us on TVO tonight. Thank you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.